if this is the shot heard around the world fired with a silver bullet, then we can say it's akin to like Lexington and Concord in the American Revolution, right? Lexington and Concord, it wasn't a significant battle. A few people were killed, a few people were injured, but what it did, it woke up the entire country to saying, yeah, now we can fight. Now let's do it. And then it became a guerrilla war of the decentralized force of ragtag, revolutionaries against the centralized British Empire.
Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. So it's Monday, February 1st, 2021. I've got Rafi Farber from the Endgame Investor on again. We started talking first in, I think, November last year. And I think this is our fourth interview. And things are getting really interesting, Rafi. What say you?
There's really too much to say. I mean, how are you doing? How are you handling this? How have you been feeling over the weekend? This is crazy.
Well, to tell you the truth, I've been, in this precious metals market since '02, and we've had, a lot of ups and downs. So, like you say, sometimes in your newsletters, you have to try to maintain a balance. So that's what I've been trying to maintain. I'm not trying. I don't expect the moon or anything. So I'm just trying to stay calm, but it is looking good. I mean, I've been waiting for some kind of, I think the word is denouement, or like the end game for the fiat dollar. I thought we saw it in 2008 when everything was collapsing, but they managed to salvage it. But you never know. This is like the 50th year of the fiat currency. We'd never had fiat currency as a reserve currency before that. So, but it's certainly getting interesting.
Yeah, I had a friend. Email me the other night. He said he thinks this is a sign of what he says is spontaneous order. Like, they're throwing money around everywhere, stuffing people's bank accounts with currency, and now this happens. I mean, it started with GameStop, but I wasn't expecting the GameStop crowd to just suddenly hit on the right note so quickly. There's a lot to talk about with GameStop, and it is very connected to what's happening now. But when I heard that they're going to go after silver, or even that there was a post about it, and then news started spreading that the Reddit crowd or WallStreetBets is going after silver. It can be a very misleading story. So we have to like read between the lines here. What they're reporting on in Bloomberg and CNBC about this Reddit crowd, none of it is true. It's sort of like American mythological propaganda. They spin these stories to make people believe that certain things are happening in a certain way, as if the Reddit crowd is fighting against Wall Street, which they kind of are, but they're no match for them. And if they keep trying to fight Wall Street or thinking they can, they're going to lose. But that really, you said we're trying to keep emotional balance, and in terms of trading, in terms of buying and selling, the one thing I'm advising my subscribers now is don't chase. Like, you should have had your positions before this, but chasing silver, or especially chasing like a stock that's in a short squeeze right now, like First Majestic, which is one of our positions. Don't buy that now. Let it ride. A few days ago, we sold that position and bought a call option instead, just to lock in the profits and then keep the call option in case the squeeze kept going. And if not, then you keep the difference. So that's the way I hedge some of the position. But the reason that I'm so excited is not necessarily for the gains, or that I think silver is going to go to 60 tomorrow. I don't think that. But the reason that I'm so excited is that this Reddit crowd, they might have fired the shot heard around the world, in the form of the silver bullet, I would say. Not that this crowd of maybe a few thousand people in the chat room has any ability to squeeze silver. They don't. they don't have much money. I don't know exactly how much money, but they definitely don't have hundreds of billions of dollars like hedge funds do. They can't do it alone. But the story that the mainstream financial media has been trying to weave, that we have these, David people that are trying to overtake Goliath, that story is romantic enough that it got people, it might have gotten people enough of a spark to really try to bring down these, I would say Wall Street generally. I don't know, big players. But here's the problem. Here's how I see it. So the Wall Street bets crowd on Reddit. So they launched some kind of a blitzkrieg, like some kind of surprise attack, with all the money that's been spewing all over the place in the Federal Reserve. They took it and they concentrated on GameStop. And they took out a hedge fund or two, Citadel or Melvin Capital. A few big guys, they really caused some serious losses. Okay, so that's a blitzkrieg, and I give them that. They did it. Congratulations. Now, the problem is, if they think that they can keep squeezing hedge fund after hedge fund, they're delusional. They can't. Because, I'm sure you've been following GameStop. I've been following GameStop just out of morbid curiosity. I have no intention of touching it. Aside maybe if I buy a 5-cent put, on like a $10 call for 2023 or something that'll risk me $50 just to, see what I can do with it. But I have no intention of even touching it. But I'm sure, 100% sure, that big hedge funds with billions of dollars are all looking at this stock, tantalizing, mouth-watering, just waiting for a buying exhaustion signal to slam it short at like $300, $400, $500 a share or whatever it is now. And eventually the Reddit crowd is going to be overwhelmed, and whoever stays in this is going to lose. They're going to lose everything. They're going to lose all their profits. And if they put anything more in, they're going to lose anything they put in. Because at bottom, GameStop is a worthless company, or near worthless. It's not, it has no business model that can succeed. It's a brick and mortar video game retailer. Forget about it. But if they want to take down Wall Street and anything other than like a superficial short position stock and at least a few million or $100 million off of a hedge fund or two, they have to go after Wall Street's weak spot, the systemic weak spot, which is money itself. That Wall Street gets its advantage over retail investors like us, specifically because the Fed feeds dollars to commercial banks who, they buy treasuries from. The commercial banks like Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan feed this money to the hedge funds. And then they have all this money to manipulate positions and screw things around. We don't have that. You had a little bit of a taste of it when, Trump and Biden gave Americans like $600 or $2,000 in their checking accounts, and they didn't know what to do with it because they can't go anywhere and they're on lockdown. So with that fuel, they were able to spark something. But if Wall Street bets and everyone else and people just trying to preserve their wealth go after the silver market, right, or the gold market, preferably the silver market because it's less liquid, they can, if they don't relent, they can force a short squeeze eventually, not immediately. But here's the thing: they can't do it with SLV, okay? Because SLV or even PSLV, because that's a centralized fund, right? If this is the shot heard around the world fired with a silver bullet, then we can say it's akin to like Lexington and Concord in the American Revolution, right? Lexington and Concord, it wasn't a significant battle. A few people were killed, a few people were injured, but what it did, it woke up the entire country to saying, yeah, now we can fight. Now let's do it. And then it became a guerrilla war of the decentralized force of ragtag, revolutionaries against the centralized British Empire. So this call on Reddit to squeeze silver itself is not significant, but as you can see, the premiums on silver, and on the call I was on last night with Andy Sheffman, I think of AppMex, the biggest silver retailer on the internet, and all these stocks, the physical silver stocks are sold out. They can't get any. The way to squeeze it is not through SLV, because just like we saw in GameStop or any of these lists of stocks that are being shorted, with retailers trying to squeeze out the hedge funds, they're going to put limits on them. They're going to put trading limits on them. They're going to say, if SLV goes too high, they're going to say, you can only buy one share, you can only sell. They'll do whatever it is And I'm not even saying it's cheating. It could be that they can't afford to, that free platforms like Robinhood can't afford these trades anymore because they can't sell the order books because the other side isn't interested in taking them. So it might, out of their own economic interest, refuse to take the orders. But you can't fight a centralized force like Wall Street that gets all their money from a central bank with a centralized fund that's controlled by the banks themselves. They have to go out and they just got to buy coins. They got to buy inventory, whatever they can get with whatever money they have. Obviously, that exactly. They need to attack the physical market. Okay, if you want to use SLV for speculating on the silver price with a little bit of money, buy call options on SLV, whatever. Yeah, sure, do it. I mean, it's a vehicle. You can use it. I'm not against it, but you're not gonna get any silver out of SLV ever. Even PSLV you won't. PSLV might be able to retain its value more if SLV is caught double counting or something, but neither of them are going to get any silver. So use it for speculating on the silver price, but you're not, especially in a currency crisis, if you actually need physical silver to buy stuff, SLV is not going to do anything for you. So yeah.
So I like the analogy about the Lexington and Concord, the first shot fired and the war went on for another 7 or 8 years after that. So I'm not saying it's going to be another 8 years for us, but I think, it's just the beginning. I think it's woken people up to the fact that Wall Street and the central banks, it's all a game and they rig it to their advantage. If you look at the New York Fed, the list of their primary dealers, it's all the major too big to fail banks, not only in the United States, but in the major countries. You just go through that list and they get the free money and they lend it to, well, kind of free right now. And they lend it to the hedge funds, to all private equities, all those people. And the other thing I wanted to say, I think what's happening with Robinhood and all the other trading apps that are pushing young people to trade, and some people with the lockdowns, they can't do anything. They're not going to work, so they're trading, and I think that's a symptom of all the inflation the Fed has created in the last 40 years. And we're coming to a point where, von Mises crack up boom. And there are some books here that I've taken off my shelf. One is Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds, of how people go mad, and people during the South Sea bubble, everyone was trading because it paid more than doing an honest day's work. And then you look at fiat money inflation in France as well. In Paris in the 1790s, when they were printing the assignats, the common man was starving, but a lot of people were making a living in what they called stock jobbing. So it's the same thing. And the same thing happened in Germany in the 20s. There's a lot of speculation as well. So even though I think we've seen a lot of speculation and the stock market has become a casino for many years, I think what's going on as well is a bit of a symptom of that. So that's why I think people need to be careful as well with the money that they leave with stockbrokers to make sure that they don't get caught in the counterparty risk game. Because I was just reading that it looks like Robinhood, there's a class action against them, and they could go under. And a lot of people could be left without their money. So that's the other thing I would say. I'm not trying to tell people don't trade or don't do anything, but I think, and that's the reason why I agree with you. SLV is not silver. It's just tracks the price of silver. Same thing for GLD. If people want to own gold and silver, they have to do it physically. PSLV, which is the Sprott, I think there's a limit. You have to have at least 100,000's worth to get the silver delivered. So it's not really for the small retail investor. So yeah, what do you think of this idea that I said that this is also a symptom of, of a bubble, all the money that's been printed out there?
Oh, I have a lot to say about that. You're still in lockdown, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So here in Israel, we've been in lockdown since January 7th, January 8th. They keep extending it week after week after week. So let me bring this whole silver squeeze thing into the real world for a second. This isn't just about some shiny metal that we're collecting, and then we can all count our profits and have a bunch of dollars and then live rich and blah 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 and happily ever after. Okay, this is much bigger than that. Okay, this is a war on money itself, and it's really good versus evil. I mean, you can ask yourself, and I ask myself, how is it that, and you talk about the madness of crowds and the world going mad, how is it that the world has shut itself down and everyone just takes it, and they've taken a year of my life and kept me in my home and my kids, and I'm jumping out of my skin because my kids are being socially repressed. This is child abuse. This is a crimes against humanity. How is it possible? So the answer is, like, how do you keep slaves? How do plantation owners keep slaves without them revolting? Obviously fear, but you keep them fed so they're not starving. You give them enough sleep, so they're not suffering too much, and then they just keep going to work the next day, even though you're not paying them. So how do you keep people in lockdown? You give them food, you give them a few $1,000, give them welfare, give them unemployment benefits, just so they can barely hang on, and then they'll just wither away, and they won't have any opposition. They won't be able to organize anything. That's how you keep slaves. And the way they do that is they print money and they hand it out. But once the money runs out, there will be no more funds to enforce this lockdown. They won't be able to pay the police. They won't be able to pay the enforcement of it. It'll just disintegrate. So this whole money thing, this whole squeeze on silver, it has direct impact on all of our lives. If we want to be freed from the madness of this world that it's turned into, then we need to see a run on gold and silver, and hopefully the lockdowns will end before then. But it might very well be that the last straw, what will definitely free it and end this and bring people back to, some level of sanity after some kind of, we call it balagan, or some kind of disorganized mess that we'll have to, pick ourselves up from, will be the death of the dollar, which will cause the death of all the fiat currencies, which are being printed to keep these lockdowns going. So this has real world consequences, and we're all under house arrest now, and there's nothing a lot of us can do to buy gold and silver, and we're doing more than just protecting ourselves financially. We're fighting back directly at the mouth of the beast.
Yeah, you spoke about that in one of your newsletters a few weeks ago about what Murray Rothbard said about hyperinflation, because a run on the dollar and into gold and silver and out of all fiat currencies, that's hyperinflation, loss of confidence. And you noted that Rothbard said that that's a way to fight the system, to destroy their money, even though it's like a very prejudicial thing for us, because it will destroy the economy for a small amount of time, because there will be no money to exchange for goods and services, but it will help hopefully defeat evil, like you said. And the other thing I saw today, I got your newsletter like about half an hour ago. You talked about that gold and silver have now gone into backwardation, which seems quite interesting, because we've been seeing that a lot of the other commodities have been going into backwardation, but gold and silver hadn't. Can you touch upon that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say they're completely in backwardation yet, but they're starting to line up that way. And this could be ephemeral; it could change tomorrow. It's something to monitor. So the prices for spot gold right now are slightly higher than the prices for March futures or February futures or whatever it is. For silver, spot silver is more expensive than silver in the future, all the way down to December. So this is not normal for monetary commodities like gold and silver, and eventually as the late Antal Fekete, the neo-Austrian economist, and I have my disagreements with him, but on this point I agree with him. That once we see gold settle into backwardation for a prolonged period of time, we're at the end game. So we'll see where it settles. The fact that spot gold is more expensive than future gold, it means that people are making a run on the gold and silver retail shops. Now, right now it's mostly silver because that's where the rumors are, and that's where that's where the oomph is, the excitement is. So people are going to the coin dealers and they're buying, and then so that forces the coin dealerships to buy more in the futures market on the front end, so they can get it delivered quicker. So the prices on the front end are higher than later, and that creates a backwardation. So we'll see. It could just be today, tomorrow, a few days, and then it could settle back into contango. But it's definitely something to watch, and we need to keep an eye out and stay level-headed with our trading and not assume that everything is going to be over in a week. This is a long battle ahead. Could be months, could be a year, but it could have started last week.
Yeah, it's difficult to. I don't know. I've been waiting for this for years. I've got books here of like Franz Pick, for example. He was born in the 1890s in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. He emigrated to the U.S. during World War II. He wrote about currencies. He wrote about how the dollar was dying in the 1980s, and they kept it going. And but I think I have a feeling we're getting closer and closer to the end game, because you can't keep inflating a system without any consequence. There will come a day where people will lose confidence, and like you said, I think the WallStreetBets is kind of triggered that first shot that was fired. As for the physical supply, I was speaking to a bullion dealer yesterday, Oliver Temple from Gold Investments, and he said he had plenty of silver. But I spoke to them this morning. They said it's running out. So yeah, I guess one of the ways to bring silver back into supply would be to see a lot higher prices. That will surely, get people to go out and get rid of their silver, which I think personally, if we are in the end game, unless you need the fiat for an emergency, I would hold on to it for dear life, because why get rid of real money for fiat currency when fiat currencies are collapsing? And the other thing I've been looking at, I don't know if you've heard of Cliff High of Half Past Human. He does this linguistic analysis, and I've been looking at him since like 2007. He used to do a report where he's got something called a web bot, and he looks at language in the internet, emotion, and he's been calling for $650 silver, but he doesn't know when these things will happen, but he's got something called temporal markers. And all these temporal markers are kind of falling into place with $650 silver, like hyperinflation, social unrest. I mean, we're seeing a lot, we're seeing in Holland, all the riots. We're seeing everywhere people protesting. In Germany the other day, I saw thousands of cars driving slowly on the Autobahn in Germany, honking and protesting. So the other thing that Cliff says is that there's going to be a lot of technology, new technology that is going to be revealed, and silver is going to be a big part of that. So aside from being money, we could see, I know silver already has a lot of industrial use, but we could see that increase even more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely we could. I don't know if silver would come back into monetary demand, because or at least it will, because silver is still considered money in the minds of humanity, which is why it became money so early on in human civilization. but it's not as needed as a money as it used to be, because gold now can be divided digitally into any tiny amount that you want, in a computer, and then fractionally owned in whatever amount. So silver used to be for retail transactions, but you don't quite need that these days, as long as the internet is running and electricity's up. But yeah, in a real emergency, you need physical silver. So the monetary ratio of gold to silver is something like 16 to 1, but not anymore. So I don't know if it's going to go back to that ratio with gold. But in 2011 we saw it go down to 30. In 1980 we saw it go down to I think close to 15, close to its monetary ratio. And if we bring 1980, 1980 in mind, right? And I wrote about this in my last letter, that the story that people spout is that, the Hunt brothers tried to corner the silver market, blah blah blah. I mean, that's like saying Reddit squeezed Wall Street. Not I mean, he was part of it. He was more like the poster boy of American propaganda mythology. If you consider like how mythology, how cultural mythologies are created, right? Like you take Greek mythology, like Zeus throwing lightning bolts from the sky. How did that start? Well, probably some kid asked his father, "What's that coming from the sky?" And he's like, "I don't know. Somebody's throwing something. Maybe he's mad at us." And then all these stories start being developed, and then okay, so that reflects a certain culture, and they get certain values from those stories. So every culture has its mythology. So the mythology that's been developed in America since 1971, the mainstream mythology, financial mythology, has been to protect the mainstream narrative that the dollar is sound, right? So if you blame it on the Hunt brothers, you can spin this whole thing as, Wall Street fat cats are trying to corner the silver market and destroy the little guy. And when actually they're doing the opposite. And really, the Hunt brothers were a minor part of it. What was happening was a dollar panic, because inflation was getting higher and higher, and people were really like dumping the dollars. And Paul Volcker was able to save the situation with 20% interest rates, but that is impossible this time. So if we talk about mythology, that mythology is evil. It's wrong. It's trying to distract attention away from the real target, which is the dollar, and put it on silver as the bad guy. The Hunt brothers were basically crucified. It wasn't fair.
Yeah, I remember I've read about the Hunt brothers quite a bit, and their father was a multi-billionaire, one of the richest men in the world, made his money in oil. So they decided after 71, when Nixon closed the gold window and took the dollar off gold, that they were going to buy silver, and they started buying physical silver all throughout the 70s. They used to fly to Zurich, Switzerland, to get physical silver and fly it back to Texas. So people only say, they cornered the market in 1980. And, the other thing that people is this mythology. They say that oil prices caused the inflation in the 70s, which is another fallacy. No one ever says, well, there was inflation because the dollar went off gold and they kept printing money. And it's going to be the same thing now. When the dollar collapses, they're going to say, it was the lockdowns and it was the Wall Street bets people. They're not going to blame the central bank for having created trillions upon trillions in the last 40 years. Really, they've accelerated since '08, but they've been doing it since Nixon closed the gold window.
Yeah, and in my if we would call it mythology, in my personal mythology, like the Talmud says that the very first question that you're asked when you die is not, did you believe in God, or did you do this commandment, did you do that commandment, did you keep the Sabbath, were you? It's not. That's not the question. The question is, were you honest in business? Did you steal from people? Right. So that's what the rabbis say. That's why there was the flood. That the basic commandments that make sense, like don't murder, don't steal, that you don't need God to tell you not to do, because it should make sense, because you can't have society with people killing each other and stealing. Those were being violated, so God had to destroy the whole world. Right? That's the mythology. Whether the flood happened, I don't really care. But that's a mythology that teaches us that you can't have a society with, murdering and stealing. So, that developed into the question that you're asked when you die is, did you do business honestly with your fellow man? And you can't do honest business without honest money. Nobody can do honest business without honest money because you need a measure. And, there's also another commandment that you have to have honest weights and measures in business. You can't mess around with the weights and measures. That's in, I think, Deuteronomy. But this is that point, that you can't have a society where business cannot be honest and business cannot be honest with a monetary medium that someone can just invent.
Yeah, and that's why I think a market like the foreign exchange market, which is probably the biggest casino in the world, it trades trillions upon trillions of nominal amount every day. Prior to 1973, because in 1971, when Nixon closed the gold window, countries still try to keep a fixed rate of exchange amongst themselves. But in 73, people realized it wouldn't work, because if you don't have an anchor to the system of sound money, people will start printing more than others. And so the exchange will, you can't keep the fixed exchange. And then you develop this floating rate exchange, which is a mess. And like you said, it's not honest and it's not sound. It's like changing the miles per hour every day, or changing the length of the foot or the inch. It would be a mess. The world would be a mess. We couldn't drive around on the roads if they changed, the speed, how you measure the speed every day or every second, like they do with money now. So yeah, I think there's a saying as well that about measures, that you need honest weights and measures, and I think that's been the whole problem of the last 50 years, and that's why unfortunately the world is in the situation it is. Hopefully people will realize that we'll have to go back to a sound and honest system, but it might take a long time. Do you think what do you think could happen? Because like in France, for example, during the fiat money inflation in the 70s and 90s, you got Napoleon after that, and that didn't end up very well.
Yeah, well, I mean, in 1923, the hyperinflation in Germany, you know what that led to.
Yeah.
We have to recognize we are in an extremely dangerous time, where, and the lockdowns are part of it, trying to separate people that are thinkers. That everyone's alone in their houses thinking, oh, does he believe in masks? Does he believe in Corona? Is he a COVIDian? Does he not? Nobody knows what anybody else is thinking, and everyone's afraid of saying what they think because they don't know how it's going to be reacted or if they're going to be arrested. I mean, this is the blanket. This is the steel curtain. This is the blanket of totalitarianism descending upon the world. But the good thing is, like, how do I see this happening? Here's how. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a prophet. But here, what I'm hoping, and what I think is reasonable, is like we imagine, like when you say something like, hopefully people will realize that we need to go back on a gold standard, and then they'll just do it. So that's I don't know exactly what's going on in the minds of people who say that, myself included, really. But it sounds to me like it's some kind of centralized vision of how things will go. Like, oh, the leaders will say, oh, this isn't working anymore. Let's go back on a gold standard. Let's decide on it, vote on it in the Senate, and then it'll happen, and then everything, all the financial things will collapse, and then everything will be fine. I don't think it's going to happen that way. I mean, the problem of this whole system is the extreme centralization of it, that it's all controlled by certain specific pressure points and actors and central banks. So I think when the whole system dissolves, just like we're seeing now in this attack on silver, it was not anything that the establishment expected. It wasn't anything that I expected. It was what we would call spontaneous order, which itself, and you see it in nature, in cornfields, right? Cornfields or potato fields or wherever they're cultivating a single crop. You start seeing insects trying to destroy parts of it to restore biodiversity. So once you have a balanced forest, the pests, are a part of one part of it, and then, it balances the other part, predator and prey, everything's in balance. So when you have one crop like corn or wheat, then you have problems and you have to start using pesticides. So when we're talking about going back on a gold standard, I don't think it's going to be centralized. I think it's going to be everything broke apart, and then you're going to have small economic actors that need to buy food or build this or make a house or, make a couch, whatever. So they need to trade something. So they're what can we use? I have some gold, I have some silver, I have some copper, whatever it is. And then from the bottom up, you'll start to see things organize themselves a little bit better. It's going to take some time, but it's going to grow organically, hopefully without their, state intervention or some wacko, Hitler or Stalin or something trying to, destroy everybody. I just pray that that's not going to happen now. And there's a lot of potential leaders that can lead to that. I don't even want to think about it. I've been through that enough. So I mean, hyperinflation itself is this spontaneous order. It's people that it's not a centralized plan. It's not people coming together in like a committee saying, okay, they're stealing our money, let's vote on it, let's destroy the currency. No, it's just people acting out of their own interest from the bottom up. And that if a gold standard is reestablished, I think that's how it would be.
Yeah, I think, like you said, it's going to be from the bottom up, because if you look back in time, before central banks, there was money already, and people exchanged, gold for commodities, for services, and silver. And then the slowly, unfortunately, government took control of it. They gave the monopoly to the bankers, and we've ended up where we are. So yeah, my hope as well is that it's not going to be like we can't depend on the government and the people who are in charge right now to fix things. I think it has to be done at a individual level, and I think hopefully the telecommunications fact that you're in Israel, I'm in London, and we can talk to each other about these things is going to help. I watched a few weeks ago or a month ago, this channel is called Truth Matters, and they were interviewing this prince actually from Liechtenstein, small country, and wedged in between Switzerland and Austria. It was one of the richest countries per capita in the world. And they asked the guy, what's the secret of Liechtenstein being so successful? And he said, despite being a really small country, we give a lot of power to the little municipalities within Liechtenstein. They, decentralization, basically, he said. And my hope is that central banks will be something of the past. In 10 years from now, we'll hopefully be writing about how the central bank, the Bank of England in Threadneedle Street is now a museum or a hotel, maybe the Trump London Hotel or something like that. What about the US? What do you think is going on economically there, and maybe a little bit politically? Do you think they're going to follow Europe as well towards more lockdowns, even though I see that some states are challenging the federal government, like Texas has been challenging the orders from DC?
Mm-hmm. Well, the federalist spirit in terms of decentralized power in America is not completely dead yet. It's weakened, but it's still there. And I think we saw that Gavin Newsom, that horrible person, they were able to threaten to recall him, and then he shut down the lockdown. So there's still these mechanisms, but I think what we're seeing is that the blue states, the deep blue states, the really socialist ones, they're on a suicide mission. They don't even realize it. Their leaders are so drunk on their own power to lock people in their homes, and they get off on this stuff, which is why they're in politics in the first place. It attracts these kinds of people that just love bossing people around or stuffing them in their houses or whatever they can do. But you have other states like Florida and I think Texas. Florida, that's where I am, and my parents, thank God, they're not on lockdown. They still have to wear a mask, but life for them is relatively normal. What do I see in America? I couldn't think of a more appropriate president, really, a more appropriate administration than Joe Biden and whatever people he has around him, the communists, and some of them are outright communists. They're Marxists. So I think he's a perfect president for what's going on now, because he has no clue what is going on, and neither does anybody around him, it seems. So I would hope to see that when this whole thing collapses, when the dollar collapses, and all the bonds that are stuffed in all these banks go to zero because the debt can't be paid in any money that's worth anything. I would hope that that the states that have any economy left, that have any gold reserves or any amount of freedom, just announce that they are withdrawing. Just leave, and maybe we see the country break apart, and maybe each state becoming more independent, something more like the Articles of Confederation. We don't need, like, the other states don't need New York and California and Connecticut all leeching off of them. Nebraska doesn't need it. So hopefully it breaks apart peacefully. The last time that happened, Lincoln, another mythology in America, he's such a great guy. Lincoln just, went out and murdered everybody when they decided to leave. And then, the myth that he freed the slaves became, the mainstream narrative. And there's a smidgen of truth to that, but it's not more than a smidgen. So yeah, I just hope for a peaceful dissolution, because I don't think the union can be sustained at this point. The blue states are way out of control, and some of the red states are too. And just hope for just a peaceful break apart where you have free trade between the states, and hopefully culturally it might stay together. It might not. I don't know. I'm out. I left. I don't want to be there anymore.
Yeah. To start wrapping up, have you got any views on the bond market? Because I still speak to a few people that work in the city, and one of the guys I speak to, he's always very bullish bonds, but he has some gold, and he seems to think that yields are going to go negative. But what's your view on that?
They could go negative, but the bond market is going to depend on consumer price inflation. It's going to depend on where commodities that people need to eat. It's going to depend on food prices. If food prices stay stable, then bonds can keep going up. If food prices go up, bonds are going to go down, because people are going to need money to spend on food, and they're not going to be able to lock it up in bonds anymore, and interest rates are going to start going high. The bonds are going to collapse almost entirely anyway. Whenever consumer price inflation starts pushing up, and this attack on silver could trigger it. Commodities are still agricultural commodities are still in backwardation. They haven't freed themselves from that. We're still seeing higher sugar prices, higher wheat prices, higher corn prices. I think corn is going way. I think it's like 560 now. For I don't know what that's 1,000 bushels or whatever the contract is. It's high. So if you want to know when the bond prices are going to start collapsing, I would look at food prices, and I would stay focused on that. When people can't eat anymore, that's going to be the end.
Yeah, and I think as well, the Fed might and other central banks might try to just print, reserves technically, and then keep buying the bonds to make the yield go down. But all that will do is going to put more and more fire up the rocket of precious metals. That will mean a weaker and weaker dollar, and it will be just like an abomination, so to speak. They say, oh, look, bond prices are really doing well, yields are low, but the currency is worthless. I think that's what it's going to come to, because they're going to try till the end, because if rates go up, the whole house of cards collapses. Because back in 1980, when Volcker let rates go up to 20%, I think the national debt to GDP was only like 35%. Now it's like 140%. So yeah, we're really between a rock and a hard place, I think. And that's why you need to keep a hold of your physical silver and gold. So Rafi, to finish off, can you tell the viewers where they can find your work?
So you can Google the End Game Investor. Just put it in Google, it'll be the first link. It's a service through Seeking Alpha. We do a daily commentary. There's a chat room if you want. If you don't want, because you're overwhelmed with all these social media, you can ignore that and just wait for me to give my commentary for the day. Now, especially, it's I would say it's a good time because there's a lot of movement that's going to go on. A lot of volatility is coming up ahead, and we have to keep a level head. And I first got into this game, in 2008. And I bought my first silver coins in 2012. My first installment of that of physical silver in 2012, and I've been down on that first buy for 9 years, and I didn't know what I was doing when I first got. I knew that the dollar was its days were numbered. I just didn't know anything else about corrections and ups and downs. But this is we're if we started a financial war, things are going to get rough now. And I'm trying to guide people into staying level-headed, keep buying the dip, keep selling the rallies with the tradable position so that you feel that you're winning and maintain the core. For moves like this, for example, when silver goes up, 20% in 2 or 3 days, that's when, our aggressive portfolio really outperforms. But I don't make aggressive bets, with like 50% of my capital. Like I keep, a tiny amount for very aggressive bets. And if I lose it, I just, replenish it later. And that protects against, the need to chase. Like a lot of people are going to get caught. For example, like, oh, silver's up 20%, buy it now. Spend $20,000, $30,000 in SLV or something, and then they'll get whipsawed. And you want to be very careful of that. It's a very dangerous time. And I'll do my best to guide you through it. And I hope to see you there. It's a two-week free trial, no charge, just to see, the kind of style that I have. And I hope to see you there at the Endgame Investor.
Great. Thank you very much, Rafi. I'm sure we'll be speaking again in the next few weeks, and take care.
You too.